Ha 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 ha. Nicholas laughed as he saw the reflection of his naked pingus in the lake. And there we are, guys. That's the opening line from the Fountainhead, quoted word by word. No, it's not.
This is like when we read in the Notes from Underground. Hello, everyone. It's been a hot minute. Yeah. We've been pretty busy, but yeah, we're back, and we have a big boy today. I think it's the longest book we've read.
Yes.
It's The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. This was published in 1943. Ayn Rand is she's a Russian-born American author. And this is kind of like, it's a fictional book, but it's also considered kind of like the first step in this philosophy of objectivism that she ends up becoming the kind of foundation of later in her life. And
I don't know if this is something we should clear up now, but I just finished the novel last night, and I thought, okay, I'm super ready to talk about this. And just as we started this, I'm like, wait, why the fuck is it called The Fountainhead?
Yeah. Like, I was thinking about that as well.
Do you have any clue or?
Well, I was looking through the Wikipedia. I also finished it last night, and I was having a glance through the Wikipedia, and there was when she was publishing it, thinking of a name.
It was supposed to be called Secondhand Lives.
Yeah, but apparently the kind of alternative name that she gave was The Mainspring. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea of the mainspring is connected to this idea of like the creator.
Right.
But because the mainspring had already recently been used for another book, she went with the Fountainhead as like a synonym.
It's catchier. I like it. Yeah.
It's kind of there's a lot to unpack here basically.
It's kind of long, although it reads like a breeze. I think it's 700-ish pages, but I read through it effortlessly in a couple of weeks. Yeah,
it was very easy to get into as well. It's like one of those books where sometimes like you're kind of trying to get in the mindset of reading, and it takes you a little bit of time to like properly lock into a book. Yeah. I found like as soon as I picked this up, most of the time it was just like it was like, okay, I can do this for a while now.
Right,
like, I can like tune in for a while.
Yeah. Easily read for 2-3 hours.
Yeah. It was great. I think. When I was like reading up on the book, it seemed like there was some criticism of her writing skill, but like I honestly
loved it.
I thought it was very well written.
It's very good. Yeah,
there was some really, really like very careful description, and I mean in terms of the scale of the book as well, just like being able to pull off a book which chronicles the lives of so many different characters over like a very realistic time span. Keeping all those threads together, as well as like making it not really boring. Yeah, was
On the writing itself, I like she often has like short, choppy sentences, which I like a lot. Like she's not wasting time. Like when she wants to, I mean, there are obviously dialogues between characters. Go enjoy the wine. There are dialogues where there's some fluff just because people are talking, but the big scene, the big turning points in the book, they're like they come at you fast, and it's like short sentences and like, oh whoa, what's happening?
Sure. I really liked how the narrative sometimes depended on what character was being followed. So sometimes there's a character has no self-assurance and is very like paranoid or self-conscious. Like it's reflected, the description of the world is kind of reflected through their eyes, and the kind of things that are pointed out and the questions that come up, it's almost like you're kind of reading their train of thought as it's happening, it was really cool.
So the Fountainhead is thematically, it's about architecture. Yeah. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of content about that. So if you're even remotely interested in architecture, I think it's a great book to read.
Yeah.
But more than that, it's more about philosophy, really, or maybe about sociology.
Social change.
Yeah. It's I think we get some like keywords thrown in there, like collectivism and so later in the book.
Yeah.
But she did a really good job of kind of framing the whole debate of good versus evil, or the creator versus the second-hander, I guess, in a very unpolitical and like very fresh and very, very deep framework, right? I mean, it's not just capitalist versus X, or like Howard Rourke is not a capitalist by any means. So, one of the key antagonists, the what is it, Wynand?
You mean
Gail Wynand?
Yeah.
He's like the arch capitalist, but he's not like the book is, it's a fight between individualism and collectivism.
Yeah.
But it's not like the hero is like a capitalist.
Well, it's I think it's I agree. For basically like 70% of the book, maybe even 80% of like the first 80%.
Yeah.
You barely touch like any real political discussion or any real like. It's very and yeah, it's like comes at very careful times, but like to your point, I think the whole thing is kind of, it's really centered on like people and like human experiences,
how you live your life, like what your key values are, and it just goes to show that is upstream of politics.
Exactly, that's like the fundamental unit that we're working with is our people, right?
Yeah.
So as you said, it's about architecture, and which is we can get into why that is as well. I think it's a really interesting discussion. In terms of the actual kind of story, we should really kind of do this as quickly as possible, I think. But
you should just read the book for yourself if you're interested in the main story. We'll just briefly summarize it so you can
come back after 700 pages.
No, we'll give a brief summary so you know what the fuck's going on. But so there's the main character, Howard Rourke. He's an architect, and he's put out from the start as this like very individualistic guy. He knows what he wants. He just wants to build, and he's not gonna like he doesn't concern himself with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets kicked out of college, and then the antagonist at the beginning is Peter Keating. He is like a very model student, graduates with honors. Is like the opposite of work basically.
He's desperate for like attention and for praise, and that's what puts him in these high positions of praise, because he really seeks them. He lives
for the praise of other people, and he doesn't really actually care about architecture. And even though he gets the highest grades, he's not actually that good at it, as we learn later. Like he borrows a lot of ideas, and
he gets Rook to do a lot of his work for him. So we start off with these two people coming to the ends of their college careers. Rourke is kicked out because he refuses to do the traditional styles that the school like requires them to do, and they both go to New York, and they end up working for very different institutions. The first one is like this dying modernist architectural firm by this guy called
Henry Cameron.
And Keating goes for the most predictably like prestigious architectural firm, which has very little to do with the work.
He turns like very quickly realized that it's most about like buttering up his superiors and like office politics. And even the top like builder guy, Frank Cohn, he doesn't actually do anything. He like just gets wealthy clients,
has dinners, secures.
He doesn't design houses, right?
Then you slowly, like these people, there are a bunch of different things that happen. We kind of see them all having their own kind of like periods of success and failure, and different things happen. And then
there are two other big characters. Or maybe three. One is Ellsworth Toohey. Toohey, whatever, I don't know.
Toohey, at least that's what the audiobook says.
Okay. Toohey. Well, he's like we should talk more in depth about his actual politics later, but he is like an altruist basically. Or claims to be. And
he's the editor of a newspaper, right?
Yes.
Called the New York Banner.
He writes like a small column, and he kind of becomes the new antagonist somewhere around the mid-level of the novel.
Yeah.
It turns out like he's pulling a lot of the strings in the background, and it's leading up to some kind of finale, though we don't know exactly how that's gonna look like. But Toohey seems to be like accumulating people who think like him.
Yeah.
And Toohey is employed by Gail Wynand, who's like he's also kind of an antagonist.
Yeah.
He's a like self-made capitalist who came from Hell's Kitchen in New York, like very poor upbringing.
Yeah.
And he's like this like success story of I fought my way to the top.
Yeah.
And now I call the shots and fuck all you guys.
And he's very, very clearly like obsessed with this notion of owning and controlling people. And is kind of this very like ostentatious expressions of wealth everywhere and stuff, right?
So he claims
he's a womanizer and whatever.
He claims that his objective is power himself. He's like, I want power. And when I actually read that, I was like, but actually, that's not quite true because, he chose wealth, not power. If he wanted pure power, he would go into politics or something. I would say.
Right.
So even though he does use like his money to exert power over people, it's almost in a kind of like he gets fun out of breaking people, basically.
Yeah, it's buying the souls of people, right?
Yeah, it's like he like would offer a socialist a lot of money to write a capitalist article.
Yeah.
Or the other way around. And so he would like it's fun for him to like demonstrate to the world that no one actually has principles, and like people are willing to sell out for money.
And the newspaper that he owns is very much that kind of paper. It's like it's all frequently described as like a yellow paper.
Yeah.
Just like, attention grabbing.
A lot of like trashy.
A lot of trashy articles, A lot of stuff dealing with like, these like quote unquote indecent, subjects and stuff.
Yeah, it's like I'll write whatever the public wants.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's one character, and then I guess another important one is Dominique Francon, who is the daughter of the key architect of the firm which Peter Keating joined.
So there's Guy Francon, who's the owner of the architecture firm, and his daughter Dominique.
Yes, she's very beautiful and also very rude and very weird. She gets into this love relationship with Rourke, which is in a whole nother arc of the story. But then she gets tangled up with Keating and Wynand later.
Yeah.
And it's this... Yeah, we should reserve another like section just to talk about their relationship. But
there's so much going on in the story. It's really, really, really like... Yeah, I don't know how the fuck you would write something like this. It's so like... Everything works and everything
works, yeah.
It all really like links very well, but like, fuck me. I don't know how to talk about this.
So before we go into specifics, I would just say that overall I really, really like this novel. It's... I said earlier to Nick, if we count Zarathustra by Nietzsche as a novel, which it technically is, then this would be my second favorite novel.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like this Ayn Rand, like, I guess, objectivism and those kind of like more individualist, liberty-minded people, obviously like that kind of stuff. So that does get me as a target audience.
Sure.
But same with Rothbard, and by the way, Rand and Rothbard did not like each other.
Right.
But same with Rothbard. Rand writes a lot of things that I've always kind of felt but never could really articulate well. That like some of the characters act in ways that I always found myself acting, and like I guess it explained like, oh, I'm actually not. Like there's actually something to why I'm doing this. Like,
right.
There's like other people who think that way, and that was really good. I will say, the protagonist Howard Rourke, he's not a realistic protagonist. Like he's an ideal man. Yeah. So he's written as like an ideal person. There is no one on earth probably like Howard Rourke. So
this was maybe my kind of biggest criticism of the whole kind of idea of it. Like he is an ideal man, and who is presented as like Ayn Rand's ideal man, and but there is a and so you see the way that he behaves in lots of different situations, and it's really like, kind of inspiring and impressive the way that he's like, he turns down a job because he doesn't want to do traditional architecture. He's like, fuck this, like I'm not doing this, and like, subjects himself to working in like a stone quarry, breaking his back to like just earn a living. And there's something about like the length of the book really lends itself to this. And I think this is one of the great advantages of the length of the book, is that we get to see all of the natures of these characters play out in a much longer time scale.
Yeah.
And you see the successes and the failures and how they all like...
There's no easy route in life for anyone.
But how they all respond to it. And one of the great things about Rourke is he's like impenetrably in the right direction all the time. Or like... It's like there's almost some like Zen kind of characteristic to him where it's like, okay, I need to go into hibernation for a minute until I eventually get back out again, and it all feels very intentional. But I was also thinking about the way that it's written, especially the Keating-Rourke dynamic. I feel like in ways we know a lot more about Keating than we do about Rourke, and Rourke is in a way like one of the least described characters.
Yeah, he is.
For example, like Keating's mother is a big character in the beginning of the book.
Yes.
And you can see through their interactions how his mother has like strongly manipulated him into doing things that he doesn't want to do, and which eventually lead him into this like mindset of, I have to get what I want by appealing to other people rather than pursuing my own passions.
She's the overprotective mother archetype.
Yeah. And the way that that's written is amazing.
It's so accurate.
Really, really like unpleasant to read.
Yeah.
But we never hear about Rourke's relationship with his parents. And
he's an orphan.
Right.
Or no, he's not. Actually, he's the son of a quarryman. Actually.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right.
So, but his mother died very young. And like his father was like just like a working guy. They didn't really have a relationship. So, but I think Rourke as a character or as an ideal wouldn't work if he had like a super supportive family.
That's my point.
Yeah,
it's like part of the whole mythology of the guy in a way. So you don't know that, and
So I think if you're reading this and you're like trying to become Howard Rourke, it's not the right way, I think, to interpret it. Although it's definitely like as any ideal, you're supposed to like aim towards something, right? So you can aim towards like some elements of Rourke's character maybe, but you're never going to be Rourke. You're never going to be God.
Yeah.
So
So it's like the whole he's like the Sigma mindset. To reduce this to like really obnoxious fucking and not even necessarily that accurate terms, but it's the same kind of thing where it's like, oh yeah, like if I just like stand in the corner of the party and look moody, then I am the cool guy.
Yeah, but the thing with Rourke is that like he doesn't get anything out of that.
Yeah,
he wouldn't, because he doesn't care about social interaction. Right?
Yeah.
So
this is my point.
Yeah. So I think one big element, and this is probably a first for me in any like written or movie or anything, is that you often have this dynamic, right? Rourke versus Keating, like the underdog, and then like the teacher's pet, but the underdog's actually more skilled, but he doesn't get the credit, whatever.
Yeah.
But then it always pans out into like a. But in the end, the underdog will get the credit, and he will be the rich one.
And that's where the story ends. But Rourke, by his nature, isn't interested in social credit. He doesn't care. He just wants to build. Like, he gets... So, okay, there's another couple words we should mention. So, this you could say... If you would sum up this novel, you could say, be selfish. Yeah.
Rand's idea of selfishness is explained in this character of Rourke, which is contrasted with unselfishness, or you could also say egotism versus altruism, or individualism versus collectivism. Those are not all the same, but they fall on the same axis, right?
Yeah.
So Rourke is a selfish character in the way that he just wants to build. He wants to do what gives him meaning, and what he wants to create for the sake of creation. He doesn't care if the buildings he built, if they're great for his clients, that's a plus.
Yeah.
If he gets paid, that's a plus. But he's not building to get paid. He's not building to house people. He's building for the sake of building great things.
Which is a personal thing.
Yes, as
he's
personally
building for him. Yeah.
Yes.
It is different to this like conventional idea of selfishness, which is like as something necessarily harmful. And I think one of the really interesting distinctions they made ways of describing it in the book was that like Rourke is not interested in he's interested in doing things for himself, but he's also not interested in making other people do things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's not he doesn't want to be coerced, but he also doesn't want to coerce.
Yeah.
At the same time, whereas you have Wine and it's a bit more difficult really with him, but
well, he transforms as well.
He does, yeah. Rather, but the like Rourke's kind of position is almost like a step removed from everything, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, I just don't want to be involved with any of the bullshit. This is the only thing that I really care about doing.
Yeah. Right. So you have at the start, especially, Peter Keating is framed as an unselfish character because he, and this is also already Toohey manipulating behind the scenes, but I think when would this be historically, like 30s?
It starts in the 1930s, yeah.
30s, yeah. So at the time, like I don't know how accurate this was in actually New York 1930s, but in the book, the architecture world has this idea that all great works have already been made in the past.
Yeah. Greeks,
Romans, Renaissance, like all architecture has already been discovered. And so now we just have to learn from the great masters of the past and basically like recreate and like, recombine and reproduce old. And you see this in Paris. I was reading this in Paris when I went there. And there were so many of these fucking buildings, especially the whole Versailles and all that like shit where it's like, 1700s. It's just like literally copying Greek stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's Parthenon.
And the way that it's spoken about in the book, it is like, let's have a Parthenon here.
Yeah.
And talking about all of these like architectural like what are they called? Like aspects, like pillars and stuff like that. And I can't remember any of the technical terms, but like it's all that shit.
Yeah.
Let's have this thing going here, and then we're gonna have 3 spires and whatever, and it's like, it's all looking back. Yeah. Anyway,
right. So Peter Keating is framed as unselfish because he actually has no building style himself. He just builds whatever fancy stuff his clients want, based on what the culture currently demands.
Yeah.
Copying from the past. Whereas Rourke and Henry Cameron as well, they kind of have a vision of their own idea. So they have like a thing that they want to build, a certain style that's particular to themselves, that is not respected at the time.
And it's often described as like being something that no one's seen before as well.
Yeah. So like some examples we get later is like the first man who invented the wheel probably was like strapped to it and killed or whatever.
Yeah.
So in that way, Rourke is from the start like framed as a very selfish guy who doesn't. This works as very well in Japanese context as well. You would say he like kuki omenai.
Yeah.
He can't read the room, or he's meiwaku. Yeah. So
someone who's like being a nuisance to other people. The idea of Rourke in Japan is kind of hard.
That's a great YouTube channel, Rourke in Japan.
But definitely on like the a lot of like Japanese management, just the way that the workplace is organized. it's not a place that Rourke would find himself at all. Like,
or even just like the way the school system is set up. Like,
sure.
There's always like in-class competition and shit like that.
Right. Yeah.
Which is like very purposely framed in that way, or like exams have like a cutoff grade depending on the other people who took the exam and shit like that.
Yeah, constant sports.
Right.
Like events and shit.
And this is one thing that I've been like very sympathetic to, but I never found a way to really express it. There's not a perfect quote in the book, but I'm paraphrasing now. So like, if someone asked Rourke, and I'm gonna use this from now, if someone asked Rourke like how, like, do you think you're like above average, or like, do you think you're better than people, and he could like honestly say, with like complete ignorance or with complete innocence, could say, it's not something that concerns me. Right. It's not even entered my mind. Like, why the fuck would you even think about that? Like,
right. Yeah, and that's the ultimate, like, quote unquote selfish thing, is like,
yeah,
I'm not interested in whether I am better than other people or not.
Yeah.
I'm so self-possessed that all I care about is the thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think that's like the real, like, that's what really captured me with this book, was that kind of approach of like, it makes, I don't know, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And the way that that kind of delivery, like, as a person, like, can you like honestly say to yourself that, like, the contrary, or can you honestly say that the contrary is like better, like, to care about, to genuinely actually care about what other people think, and like what other people, whether you're better than other people or not.
It is a book that encourages you to live more selfishly in a good way, and give less fucks about like things that don't matter, I would say.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's a book that can give you confidence as well.
For sure.
So yeah, a little bit about, like, we're both kind of in a position now where we're finishing university, and I don't know who the Keating of us is. I'm definitely the Keating.
No, you're not the Keating. Oh, well, you get the MJSP prize. That's on stage.
If I do get that for whatever fucking reason. No, but we were speaking about this when we had lunch before this. This is a good time to read. This is now, like, when you're kind of at the edge of a career, or at the edge of starting some kind of meaningful work, and like putting your mind to something. Yeah. How do you want to approach it? And like, what can you do for yourself now that will benefit you in the future? I'm like, my goal is to go into film production in Japan, and you know, it's obviously no surprise, film production is, and any kind of, a lot of like creative industries are structured on a lot of the things that embody Keating. You know, finding your market, finding an audience, rather than doing things entirely for yourself. Getting up in the industry by, you know, like, appealing to other people, personal connections and all that kind of stuff.
And you'll probably encounter a lot of the like Rourke type shit, where every time you want to do something original, it's like, but it's already all been done. Like, what do you mean you want to do, like, there's already like, I don't know, who are the great filmmakers in Japan? Kurosawa.
Right, sure.
Yeah, but you know, there's like, you're not gonna be the next Kurosawa. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a formula, just copy paste, and
Exactly. It's a 10-hour variety show where the first person that farts loses. Just do that.
Yeah, I mean, for me as well, I'm going into econ masters now, but I've kind of set my mind. I don't know how well this will age when I eventually become Ellsworth 3. But I've kind of set my mind already on going into a completely different field for very like selfish reasons, just because because it's always like, I want to go into navigation and like do stuff with.
You say field, but you mean ocean.
Ocean, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's just like, I like boats. I like I like the idea of driving a boat, and it's just I think that's something that's something that I think is meaningful, would give me like fulfillment, and also just I hate the whole career path of where you would go if you went into economics. Everything I've learned from studying economics is that the people who would like become economists are actually the enemy.
So
if you study economics correctly, that's what you'll learn. So yeah, I don't want to be in the AGA. What is it?
Such a good point.
Americans Guild of Architecture Order. I don't want to be one of those guys. I don't want to be Ralston Holcomb or whatever. So so yeah, and whenever I tell that to people, something they're like, yeah, but you're going to like this great university, you should definitely do PhD, and you should definitely go to Stanford and like
professor.
It's this shit, and it's like and I guess this book definitely like reassured me in pursuing what I want to do. So.
Well, I think in your case it's like the failure would be to from the perspective of the Fountainhead, the failure would be to say like, oh yeah, because I've gone to this great university, I should do a master's here. I should use this experience, entirely for what it is, rather than
I should get a government position in urban planning.
Well, that's what happens when you start looking for jobs.
Yeah. So I don't want to work in anything government related. So yeah, and I guess one other thing as well is that if you follow Keating to his 40s, like he gets maybe one of the worst fates dealt in this book.
Definitely.
So the like guy who's at first cocky, gets all the good jobs, is the like
he marries Dominique Francone,
gets the hottest girl, is like gets the highest salary, is like hailed in the press as like the future of architecture,
gets all the biggest jobs.
He gets one of the hardest endings, and ends up really miserable. So in that sense, it's also like, it's not just encouraging to do what you want, but it's also scary to think through what happens if you just go with the flow. Right?
Exactly. And so we kind of mentioned this earlier, but the flow of this novel is I thought it was really, really interestingly written, how the social change is written in this book, because it's reflected in the architecture. So we start off with these traditional styles prevailing, and then eventually, like, the kind of modernism that Rourke is creating becomes a little bit more commonplace.
Yeah.
And it takes a different form, but it's a similar kind of like some similar kind of principles, and we get this like hint to like brutalism coming from Europe and shit. And it happened so subtly. I felt like when I was reading it, it sort of seemed to all happen behind the words or something. And then suddenly you're like, oh, we're in this completely different world. And I thought the way that that was like written over this long expanse of pages, and when I'm like thinking about this book and like reading it, I'm like, okay, now we're in a very different world to where I used to be before. That like feeling, I felt like was kind of reflected how I feel in life, with the same kind of feeling of like when social changes happen. And you're like, wow, like this is very different to how things were 5-10 years ago.
Right.
The whole playing field is completely different.
Yeah. Now that you say it, it feels very realistic how that changes. Yeah.
And a lot of this is like funneled through Toohey and the press. And the press is like a huge part of this whole...
Yeah. Which I think, especially in the US, is very accurate.
Yeah. It's the idea of like this... tastemakers are a huge thing. There's people that have, like, Toohey is one of them, and you get these descriptions of these, parties where there are these up-and-coming writers and playwrights who are absolute dog shit, writing, like, the worst things in the world, who are getting promoted.
Which is... that's because Toohey picked them, right?
Exactly.
It's, the big Toohey speech at the end where he talks to Peter Keating. We should read some of like a page or something.
That's heavy.
That speech
I have almost all the whole thing highlighted.
So fucking good.
It's great.
I have a favorite quote of the book actually from that speech. I'll bring up. I wanted to mention also, I was reading René Descartes while I was in France, reading this as well. And there was a perfect quote from his Discourse on the Method, which is Descartes' famous work. So in the Fountainhead, there's Rourke says, especially at the end, how he doesn't like to cooperate with other architects. He doesn't believe in councils and cooperation. He doesn't believe in like what we now in school get taught as teamwork.
Right.
It's like put 5 people in a group and now make a thing all together.
Yeah.
It's like no. Everyone has their own thing that they want to do, and then if you can voluntarily arrange beneficial relationships, you can work together in that way. But yeah, it's like the idea of like too many cooks spoil the soup or something, right?
Sure.
So, it's like word for word almost in Descartes' book is a quote from the Fountainhead.
Wow.
It's very cool. So this is Descartes going to Europe, or to like, I mean, he's from Europe, but traveling through Europe and like looking at buildings, and he says, oh God, where is it? No. Okay. The quote is, among these, one of the first I examined was that often there is less perfection in works composed of several separate pieces and made by different masters than in those at which only one person has worked. So it is that one sees that buildings undertaken and completed by a single architect are usually more beautiful and better ordered than those that several architects have tried to put into shape, making use of old walls which were built for other purposes. That's
literally
yeah. So there's all these events and like prizes where like different architects in the Fountainhead, right, where different architects get invited to cooperate to build something. The one that fails, I think, is the March of the Centuries or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just everyone wants to like one up everyone, and just basically like try to work it out as a commune. And it fails because no one has a vision. No one knows what they actually want to do.
Yeah.
And so on the other hand, Rourke's building style it's often described as the building serves a central idea.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe the best definition given in the book. So Rourke's buildings they're organized around a central unifying idea that is something like, well, it's also, it's obviously it has also some regard to the utility of the specific building, but generally I guess it's aiming at greatness, or it's aiming at like optimization or something like that.
Yeah.
And it shuns away from unnecessary decorations and like, just like unnecessary pillars here and there just to show like, oh look, it's a Greek pillar.
Yeah.
Like, so they're like, I don't know, it's not exactly functionalism, but it is, it has elements of modernism, elements of functionalism, and then, just the idea that there's like a central theme running through every single part of the building.
Right.
Nothing is not fit in with the theme. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about this, and this is something I wanted to kind of talk about. I have the quote here actually. So this is when he's speaking to the dean, and the dean is talking about rules. So there are certain rules that we need to observe when it comes to making traditional architecture. And he says, rules, here are my rules. What can be done with one substance must never be done with another. No two materials are alike. No two sites on earth are alike. No two buildings have the same purpose. The purpose, the site, the material determine the shape. Nothing can be reasonable or beautiful unless it's made by one central idea, and the idea sets every detail. A building is alive like a man. Its integrity is to follow its own truth, its one single theme, and to serve its own single purpose. A man doesn't borrow pieces of his body. A building doesn't borrow hunks of its soul. Its maker gives it the soul and every wall, window, and stairway to express it. And there's a disappointing response, but all the proper forms of expression have been discovered long ago. I don't know, like, when I think about, like, speaking about purpose, and speaking about purpose as, like, something that can run as this like central idea through a building, that screams modernism to me. And it screams this, like, idea of functionalism and, like, the idea that you can, like, boil down the essence of a building to a single kind of purpose, or maybe even a single kind of activity or something.
Well,
yeah.
Yes and no. So that, I think that's definitely an element of modernism, but then, and this would be the kind of buildings that Keating made later in the march of the centuries. You also in modernism often get, like, just crazy shapes for the sake of crazy shapes.
Sure.
That have no function at all other than shock value. Right?
Yeah. Well, this is, like, also the contradiction of modernism anyway. It's like when you look at an old, like old cars, like many old automobiles from, like, the 40s, I guess, 30s and 40s, or 20s even maybe, like, a lot of them were considered, like, huge, like, functional things, like incredibly functional objects. But when you look at them, like, there's actually so much more ornamentation than you
Right.
actually, like, realize. And some of the, like, first quote unquote functional buildings still had very, like, they had, like, leaves engraved into them and shit. And so this is this is about the ideal, right? And I think this is something you kind of have to forgive because we're talking about Rourke.
Yeah.
But the idea of this, like, no fat form follows function philosophy thing is actually, or maybe even, like, kind of impossible to really create.
It's interesting. So one of the buildings is the Stoddart Temple, which can get destroyed later. But the function of that building is to be a place of worship. And so Rourke places in the center this, like, beautiful statue of Dominique, basically. But so at the first glance you might say, but wait, this is technically unnecessary ornamentation, right?
Yeah.
But well, no, it's not, because beauty, if it's integrated with a central idea, actually beauty serves a function, right?
Yeah.
So this is why Rourke's style is actually not just, like, Stalinist brutalism,
right,
or, like, super hyper functionalism.
Yeah.
Like, the beauty of a building also serves a function. I guess the more or less impossible thing that we have to forgive is that, like, obviously, if there was just a formula to do perfect buildings that Rand had discovered, she would have just written the formula down.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we kind of run into the problem with the same thing with the Yellow King.
Yes.
Where you have this, like, this book that drives you mad, but we don't know what the book looks like. We just kind of have to suspend our disbelief. And yeah, the thing about that's another thing. Yeah, the whole, like, beauty as function. And that, like, there was I can't remember his name. I'm trying to find it, but it was a recent, like, TED talk from some, like, famous British architect. He's the guy that built the honeycomb, like, thing in New York that people couldn't stop throwing themselves off. But he has this whole thing where it's like function should mean beauty as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, at that point, the functionalism maybe doesn't really mean anything then. Right.
Well, so it's a interesting dynamic, right? So in the case of the Stoddart Temple, it makes sense why there would be a statue, right? To, like, this is in the inspiring of man's greatness and so on.
Yeah.
And also the whole discussion of, like, people saying that's not a temple and Rourke saying that is a temple.
Right.
It's very interesting. But obviously, if for the later one, the housing project, it wouldn't make sense to have, like, Greek statues there.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point. Insofar as they are actually inspiring things. Yeah.
I think one of the, like, most easy to understand, like, Rourkean projects is the summer vacation thing.
Yeah.
So he gets this contract, and there are circumstances with that as well, but he gets this contract for a, like, summer vacation like getaway for lower middle class people.
Yeah.
And so Rourke's whole idea is he's gonna make like little individual houses that have their like own little beautiful garden and thing and shit, and they're, you know, they won't have like large pools and other shit or like big barbecues that you could do with a more centralized like hotel kind of thing. But the whole point is that, you know, middle class or poor, like lower class people, if they go on vacation, they want to get away from their like crowded apartments. They want a little like piece
privacy.
of privacy.
They want privacy.
They want privacy, a little piece of their own, and so that would go against the mainstream at the time, which would have been just to make like a big resort with like a bunch of little cabin apartments, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, everyone is like then in the same fucking big pool.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, kind of like
everyone migrates from one area to another place and then they all go back at the end of the weekend.
So I think that was a very good way to explain this, like each place has different challenges and we want to integrate like a central idea.
Yeah. And treating buildings as individual things as well. And I do agree that, I mean, generally from like the modernist perspective of like, treating a building as something that is designed for a specific function. And like you know, it doesn't necessarily, and if you look at all modernist architecture, there's like ornamentation everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different kind of ornamentation. But yeah, because the alternative is like, and it's described in the book, and I love the way it's described because it's exactly how I feel about like traditional architecture, where it's talking about like, you know, you design the steel frame with this like modern technology, and like, you know, everything that you don't see is like brand new technology, and then you just like sculpt this bullshit on the outside that makes it look old, you know. And there are times in the book where they're literally talking about like just, I don't know, just like fabricating the sense of the traditional, which goes against, you know, it's like old things are beautiful because they're old, right?
Yeah.
Making something that looks old is like such a slight against that like part of the old thing's real beauty.
Yes. And I generally felt that when I was in Paris looking at old sculptures or buildings.
Right.
And, you know, there's a lot of like Greek antiques and Roman antiques which are very cool. And then you have like for sculptures at least, there is no Greek antique buildings in Paris. But then, you know, there's one of the big points where people go is the Pantheon, and it's like, I think it was supposed to be the tomb of Louis XIV. It didn't end up being that,
right.
But whatever. But yeah, it's just like this copy of this already existing building,
right,
that they just like plopped into the middle of the city, like it's obviously doesn't fit into the city at all. Yeah. And it's just reading the Fountainhead and then seeing that, and it was like, oh, this was built a couple of 100 years ago or 250 years ago, but it looks like it's from the Greek age. It's like, this is fucking lame. Like, fuck you.
Exactly. But there is another side of this which I also wanted to talk about regarding like the traditional modernist thing, and maybe like obviously we want to keep this like relevant, but there are like at this point like almost like countless studies that talk about like the psychological and like phenomenological effects of different kinds of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's the flaw of her writing necessarily, but it's something that is interesting. Like basically a lot of studies like about people's perception of different kinds of buildings and the way that people feel around certain kinds of buildings tends to support the idea that traditional styles of architecture are like better, or like they have like they're in a bunch of different ways. Like people report like liking them more, people report finding them easier to navigate. People report like feeling less intimidated by them. Like if you're talking about like, you know, imagine the difference between a court building that's in a traditional style versus like some grey concrete block with, you know, all the same windows, and you know, kind of just general well-being compared to different kinds of architecture. And I think maybe it's a product of like the context, like the historical context when this book was written, and you can't really do much. You know, when you're talking about architecture, you either talk about traditionalism or modernism, really. But I thought that's kind of, yeah, a bit of a contradiction when we're talking about like modernism or Rourke's architecture is this like supreme thing, if that makes sense.
But even then, and this is I think reflected in the book as well, because one thing, especially when you come to things with like self-reported happiness of the crowd, it's like fucking dumb pigs are gonna like whatever their masters have been feeding them for the last since when they were born, and so it's like if you've been told that blue is the good color and red is the bad color, then you're always gonna like blue, and
possibly.
The people in the book also, like the public hates Rourke's architecture. There's only like a few select people who like his stuff, and we have to talk about Nietzsche as well because there's a big connection. But this is one of the things where I thought of Zarathustra, where it's like he goes to the crowd fails him, and he goes back into the cave and he's like, I'm gonna find my guy, I'm gonna find my people, I'm just gonna do my thing, and some people are gonna react to me, and I think that's very
I agree with you for sure. I just thought it's interesting because like you say, you know, people are taught from a young age that this is like what is good. I'm not necessarily convinced that is necessarily like what is, like I don't necessarily think that, well, there's a couple of things like I feel like people don't like modernist architecture because they feel like they're being forced to like it. You know what I mean? Like because it's like, oh, this weird ass looking like grey block that all the high culture is praising and saying is amazing. But I don't get it, right?
Well, that would be kind of, and there's a thing as well with the failed modern architecture in the Fountainhead as well, that Keating built and shit like that. It's and a lot of that I felt is so ahead of its time, because this idea of Toohey cultivating this class of completely incompetent fucks in architecture, in theater, in literature, to flood all those fields. And he explains basically like he wants power, he wants to control people, and so his first step, or his like underground work, is if you call out greatness directly and deny it, it's not going to work. But if you build up a bunch of bullshit and make everyone believe it's great, and everyone is now in this social environment where this complete heap of dog shit is praised by everyone, that's the only sure way to actually destroy greatness.
Right.
And I think that is so pervasive in modern culture in so many fields, and we're seeing it without getting like too political, but I think we're seeing it a lot in the, like, if we're talking about beauty specifically, in like the modeling sphere, and with like magazines and all this like plus sized stuff, where it's like that's like a perfect Toohey move, I think. It's like, you want to destroy beauty, everyone's beautiful, any shape is beautiful, you're a tub of lard, you're actually gorgeous. And that's like actually Ellsworth Toohey working behind the scenes right there.
I see what you're saying. Well, like it's the like confusing in people what again, this is the idea of objectivism, which would later become her like kind of her shtick, that there is like some observable phenomena in the world that we can perceive this as something as beautiful and something that isn't. I would, going back to this the traditionalism modernism thing, I would maybe actually argue, and I don't, maybe not, I it's hard to say, like there's some some studies for like neuroscience, for example, measuring people's like eye movements when they look at buildings, and like one of the hypotheses that I read about was like because of like certain levels of detail and the ways that 3D space is used in buildings and things like traditional styles, it gives like the eye more points of contact when they're when people are interacting with buildings, and the design of these buildings like almost naturally complements that like thing, right? But with more modern styles, which have like flat walls of concrete, for example, with no discernible details. On the other hand, it's like actually quite confusing. So it's not it's like there's a social aspect of it, but it's also seems to go a layer below that. And when you talk about
I think you're right.
So I mean saying you like a building, but or saying a building stresses you out, or saying it's hard to navigate a building because of
if you're in a room that's completely bright red.
Yeah,
I think and you can't focus. There's probably some aspect to that that's not just culture.
Yeah,
but so there are definitely elements of that. But then again, I don't think Rourke would build those buildings.
Yeah, no, that's the thing as well. So to segue from here, so on the Wikipedia, we'll be as shameless about this as we can. The one of the there's a couple of inspirations for Rourke cited in the Wikipedia, and one is a guy called Frank Lloyd Wright, who is he's one of the granddaddies of modernism, and his like most famous building is called Falling Water, and it's the photo that we looked at earlier. And it is this, I think, this.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, if you look up "Falling Water" by Frank Lloyd Wright,
and what going to this conversation about modernism. Yeah, there's this conception of modernism as these like grey, brutal blocks of like shit that look. I mean, I'm partial, but I get why people hate it. But then you see something like Falling Water, which is basically this like quite interesting. There's a lot of like flat shapes, but
I like it. Yeah,
3-dimensional, and it's integrated into this like water, this stream in this forest. And talking about streams, this is like a Fountainhead.
Yeah.
But
you ruined it. You had a whole thing in you.
I was waiting so long for that. But I think it's a good example of something that you've kind of never seen before, but kind of marries a lot of different interesting things together.
I mean,
and was probably pretty controversial at the time as well.
Yeah, this could be something that Henry Cameron would have built in the book.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, with like visualizing Rourke stuff, it's supposed to be an ideal. So
of course,
it's the same Christian thing of like you're not supposed to paint God. Like,
yeah.
You're not supposed to like paint the like ideal, right? So
yeah. Yeah, cool. So I guess we can go into talking about Nietzsche a bit as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Nietzsche, and then I want to do some quotes. Maybe take a quick break after Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ayn Rand was very inspired by Nietzsche. She liked Nietzsche a lot. You can tell she definitely read Zarathustra.
1,000,000%.
There's a lot of... I think one of my favorite elements was in Zarathustra there was this part about... And this very much spoke to me at the time when we read it, is pity as a vice, not as a virtue.
Right.
And Nietzsche makes the case in Zarathustra in his very stylistic, artsy way of the writing that pity actually sucks and it's bad and you shouldn't pity people.
Right.
And it's not just pity; it's really more like empathy on a whole. So empathy is not good. Sympathy is good. Empathy is not.
Right.
And
so just to confirm we're on the same page. It's like the there is one person feeling bad. Me feeling bad as well creates more badness.
Yes.
Me being, a positive, like, help to them. Well, just being embodied as myself is like the most positive thing to do, I guess, right?
Yeah, so there's like, if you go at it from a utilitarian lens, it's like on a base level of average happiness.
Yeah.
You pitying someone or feeling empathy, now you're sharing their pain. Well, it's like but you're not actually sharing the pain. That person is still in pain, and now you're also in pain.
Yeah.
So it's not like the pain was divided by two.
Sure.
So now there's more pain. But Fountainhead does a very great job of really articulating this principle a lot better through Toohey, through characters like Catherine, the first like girlfriend of Peter Keating, who their story's so fucking sad.
Yeah.
But she was this carefree girl basically who was manipulated by her uncle Toohey into this whole, as everyone else is manipulated by Toohey, into this philosophy of altruism, which at the end the mask slips and Toohey kind of admits that obviously there is no altruism, you fucking idiot. There is no fucking altruism, you fucking idiot. It's all a power game.
Yeah.
And Catherine is like one of the perfect victims, I think, portrayed in the book of that.
She's very indecisive and quite kind of sickly and indecisive at the beginning.
Yeah, she becomes a social worker
after doing work for
her uncle.
She can't make decisions for herself.
Yeah, and then obviously as a social worker she becomes more and more miserable. Yeah. And there's this dialogue between her and Toohey, like, I'm trying to integrate this thing you taught me. Like, her uncle always tells her, like, you're not supposed to be selfish, you're supposed to be selfless. So, and then she's like, okay, so I'm working with these sick children and I'm trying to be selfless, but I can feel myself being more and more contemptuous and being dependent on them, being dependent on me,
and dependent on their suffering as
yes,
well, right?
And like my whole existence, my whole point is that there's these people who suffer, and my like purpose comes out of their suffering and out of them being down. Yeah. And it's basically the welfare state, right? It's like the welfare state doesn't fix problems because it's dependent on the problem. Once the problem goes away, all the people who work in the welfare state would be unemployed. And it's that principle in a person is Catherine, basically. Yeah. And then she does go, at the end, she does work in DC, actually. So it works out perfectly well.
Yeah. And she's like the key representation of that. But you also see it not just in this like state aspect as well, but even in the more private sphere of like charity, or like people in these, it's all dealing with high society, a lot of this book, and all this speak of like charity balls and stuff, and these like
hostess events and
and I guess what would have been pretty typical at the time of like wealthy housewives having their like housewife organizations where they hand out meals to homeless people or whatever, or like their charity organizations and stuff, right? So there's that social prestige aspect of it as well. Yeah. Which is what Catherine ends up kind of embodying, I think, in a way. Later on, so Keating and Catherine almost get married at several points in time, and because Keating is like just an absolute atrocious person, like just destroys all of these things and treats her like absolute shit. And then when he's at the lowest point in his life, he sees her on the street, and she's like actually doing well for herself now, and is like,
well, yes and no.
Well, she's like, she believes she is at least.
Socially,
like,
she has higher standing.
Yeah.
But in the last scene we had with her was a long time ago, and she was kind of trying to reject Ellsworth.
Yeah.
And be like, I'm not scared of you. She's like yelling that. She doesn't know why, but she's yelling that.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is she's completely dead. There is no soul inside her anymore. She has become like the perfect soulless bureaucrat who is like trying to implement all this housing projects and welfare here and all this like. So she's been completely, the self has been killed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very bleak meaning from both parts, in terms of both of them.
So even though Keating approached her being very, I'm a complete piece of shit and I'm sorry for all I've done to you, he kind of almost walks away from that scene with pitying her, because she realized, oh god, she's actually, it's too late for her. It's too late for me as well, but at least I'm aware of it.
Sure. Well, that's the thing. It's she's become so embodied by this this idea that she's she's just kind of reeling off responses, the kind of canned responses.
And Keating also becomes killed his self becomes killed by Toohey a scene later or so.
Yeah,
that's my favorite scene, is their dialogue.
It's a great part of the book.
Oh, we went away from Nietzsche.
Yeah, so to go back,
jumping around.
There are some very clear comparisons you make. Even I was surprised at the very beginning. We meet Rourke and he's in nature, similar to how Zarathustra begins at the top of the mountain, and then comes down and has his battle with the Dean.
Slabs of granite.
Yeah. It's a very kind of visceral description.
Yeah.
Apparently, in the first draft of the book, she included quotes from Nietzsche.
Yeah, so or at least there was supposed to be in the beginning, in the intro, there was supposed to be a Nietzsche quote, and I've googled this, and apparently this isn't a quote from any of his main published writings.
Yeah.
So maybe she it's actually not a Nietzsche quote. She kind of paraphrased.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm just gonna read the thing that Google spit out.
Cool.
Out of damp and gloomy days, out of solitude, out of loveless words directed at us, conclusions grow up in us like fungus. One morning they are there, we know not how, and gaze upon us. Morose and grey. Woe to the thinker who is not the gardener, but only the soil of the plants that grow in him.
Cool.
Very, very cryptic Nietzsche.
I've woken up with fungus on me before.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
The conclusions that just kind of grow inside you, we don't know where they're from. It is kind of similar to the way in which the mass of people, the public, reacts in this work. So they're manipulated by Toohey, by the newspapers, by Gail Wynand.
Yeah.
And people take all, and it's very parallel to just modern American politics. People have very strong opinions.
Yeah.
But they're not their own opinions, obviously.
Most people can't articulate why they believe certain things.
I saw this on the news, or it's people around me believe this, so therefore,
Yeah, and you have these descriptions in the book as well of this person chimed in agreeing with what everyone said, even though they didn't know what they what they were talking about.
Yeah.
It's very, very on the nose.
I wanted to read my favorite quote from the book,
and
then this is, and we haven't read Goethe's Faust yet, although I'm quite familiar with the work. So a little background: Faust is a work by Goethe, very famous German writer, and it's I actually didn't read it in school, but if you pick German advanced course, then you're probably gonna read it in school.
Right.
It's his main work.
German advanced.
I picked English, so
right.
That's why I'm here. So the main, it's very Christian themed, and there's the devil in that work, Mephistopheles, Mephisto. It's this character preying on the main character, and he sells his soul, and then there's a lot of this interaction of it. Again, I haven't actually read it, but there's a lot of excerpts online as well. Where, throughout the story, the main character becomes more and more miserable because he sold his soul basically with this interaction with the devil, and there's a lot of back and forth between them. So Toohey talking to Peter Keating in the end, explaining his actual philosophy and his altruism basically, there is a mention of Faust, and that line came so hard I like fell back in my chair and went ooh. It's like 4 a.m. I'm alone in my room. I read that line and I'm like reacting like it's a rap battle.
I have it here.
So I have it here though. So do you want to read it?
Where from?
Where from, right? So as a background, Tui is trying to get Peter Keating to admit that he didn't design this building.
That Rourke designed.
Rourke actually designed it, but Keating promised Rourke to not tell. So could you read from I designed it? So this is Peter trying to insist.
Yeah. So you'll tell the truth. You'll tell them who designed Cortland and why. I designed it. If you want to say that on the stand, you'd better do something about your muscular control. What are you shaking for? Leave me alone. Too late, Petey. Ever read Faust? Or Faust? What do you want? Howard Rourke's neck.
Yeah, so that, like, too late, Petey. Ever read Faust? He's literally, by the way, I am Satan. It's literally like, yeah, you made a deal with the devil, me too, he being the devil, and it's right. Let me out, I want out of this, and he's like, too late, haven't you realized, I am Satan?
Right.
Damn, that was so good.
Yeah, Tuhi's manipulation throughout the whole book is, it really, the way that it becomes clear, like, throughout, and, so, you have these like interactions between Tuhi and Keating talking about like, he's like, what do you think about this guy's new book? And Keating's like, oh, it was an absolute, it changed my life.
The Gallant gallbladder or whatever. The Gallant gallstone.
Yeah. And he's like,
what did you think of the new Marvel? What did you think when they put the black female lead in this movie?
Shut up. But like when he's reading the books, he's like, you know, Keating couldn't understand what was being read, what he was reading.
Yeah.
But he felt like the words had deep meaning beyond what he could understand, and so liked the book. And when he's speaking with Tuhi and he's saying how much he loved this book, and then later on you realize like it becomes like super clear how this like what Tuhi's been thinking the whole time and how he's been like playing. It's so insidious.
And he sneaks in so much doublespeak where he's actually quite obviously saying a lot of the time like his manipulation, but he's purposefully doing that in a way that it's like his words are disguised enough so that it's both obvious but also you can't really tell.
Yeah, you have to question it.
Yeah. And I like, this is also very Nietzschean, the fact that this most evil character, that he's physically is super weak. It's very ill and brittle, and it's this tiny little man who's just completely incompetent and weak.
Yeah.
Physically. That's very Nietzschean, because Nietzsche's all about like
physical strength.
Like not just physically, but also like, you know, I guess Rourke would be a good, because Rourke is just kind of lanky. He's not strong. He's just, I mean, he works in the quarry.
He's described as like masculine and sometimes as like chiseled or muscular at times, I think.
Right, but there's
he's not like a Giga Chad like level or anything.
There's like a part where Dominique, I forgot to whom, but she's like, Rourke is very attractive or whatever. And you know, other people apparently don't see that in Rourke.
Yeah.
So he's described as like a weird lanky dude who's just too long.
He's ginger as well.
Yeah, he's ginger. It's a minus point.
Crime against humanity.
But yeah, so there's he embodies this idea of greatness and aiming up, the Ubermensch, right? Whereas you know, Tuhi is very much like a weak. He's described as weak physically, so it's what Nietzsche would call evil is weakness, right?
Yeah. Just, I guess, a closing thought, talking about that, like, up trajectory and down trajectory and how that manifests. How do I articulate
What do you mean
this?
by up trajectory?
Up, like, positive trajectory that Rourke represents.
Right, okay.
Versus what Tuhi represents. it's kind of like, we have this like dichotomy of individualism or egotism versus altruism. And the way that it's sort of presented in the book is like, one is building upwards with intent, and one is building down with intent. And like and this is something that I think it's in Toohey's speech.
Stop all progress, perfect equality.
Yeah, but he kind of even worse than that. It's like the inward downward trajectory, which makes suffering the purpose of life.
Yes.
Which means going down is the only purpose of life. And I thought that it kind of connects to the Machine Stops, that book.
Yeah. You read that on the...
Yeah, I read a little while ago. Which is a lot about, society comes to a point where, like, especially reflected in academia, the only thing possible is self-reflection and learning about the obscure facts of the past rather than, thinking about the expanse of space, out in the galaxy that could be explored and all the kind of potential and opportunity that exists out there. But yeah, I mean, talking again about how this like book is it skirts political discussions quite well, is like, it's like, what would you prefer, to live like a positive experience where you're thinking about going up, and or would you prefer this experience where you're like, you and everyone around you is always thinking and absorbing and putting all your energy into the most miserable aspects of your existence or human existence, and which will make people happier in the long run, or which will make people more fulfilled in the long run.
Well, it's very interesting thinking about engineers. I love engineers because they're so innocent and obsessed.
Yeah.
So if you ever meet like a very nerdy engineer, it's great because they instinctively, it's kind of like Mike, the building guy, the electrician in the book.
Yeah.
They're like kind of obsessed with this material thing of like building something. Like they're obsessed with optimizing a structure, or optimizing a code if it's software engineer or whatever.
Right.
And they just love that for the sake of it, but they can't really articulate it, and they don't really think about it. They don't really think of it as like, this gives me personal pleasure.
Right.
They just like this thing and they just want to do it. So they go to college, they learn it, and then they go to these. Then the best one ends up at Google, and I think, was it Demore? There's a famous incident at Google where Demore, he's an engineer. He wrote this internal memo in Google, and it was about the searching algorithm. Yeah. Like trying to like optimize like certain search results, and he found like, obviously, like there's psychologically differences between men and women, and also how they interact with Google.
Right.
So it's like, most men more search like this, most women search blah blah blah. And then he was fired from Google for having said that there's differences between men and women.
Right. Okay.
And he just couldn't understand it. But I'm engineering the system. He says I'm just optimizing this. But obviously there's you have all these Tooheys and all these social theorists and like no. Men and women are not it's only gender. There's actually no difference. It's all socialized.
Right.
But he's like, but I'm just trying to optimize this, and he just couldn't understand why that's even so. Yeah, it's a very interesting. Yeah, this like the builder versus the like, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think I see what you're saying. Yeah. This innocence of optimizing things is definitely like I don't know.
I just want to build with my Legos, like, I just want the perfect Pokemon team, like, yeah.
We should finish it up, but you've inspired another thought in me. That idea of like, I just want to do something. I just want to make this. I just want to do that. This kind of like natural, tendency to do some kind of activity, which is kind of talked about in the book. Like when you ask Rourke, like, what do you want to do? He's just like, I want to make buildings, and it's like, why do you want to do it? It's like, there's no, I don't think he is really, he doesn't give like any satisfactory answers to that question.
Yeah.
And there's this I can't remember where it comes out in the story, but this kind of like idea of this like protected private individual part of you that you don't share, and maybe you don't even know how to necessarily articulate anyway, but necessarily drives you to do certain kinds of things, and this being kind of like your spirit, or like, and this ultimate thing that you can't sacrifice, that in a way that kind of bridges Rourke from this kind of like mythological like, or mythic like ideal into something you can kind of imagine, I think, in a way. Like being able to actually, like, you meet people who are just completely obsessed with certain things, and they don't necessarily know how to explain. Many people try, or they come up with some kind of, you know, like my dad showed me this when I was younger, and it's my dad that got me into it. But that probably doesn't really explain, you know, fundamentally why.
There's lots of people who don't do what their dad did, so.
Exactly. Yeah, and there are lots of dads that show their kids the same thing. So. I thought that was, in term, like, there's a big discussion about the nature of like craft and art, and like your personal like activity or objective, or I think there's quite a big discussion we can have about that as well with this book.
And okay, let's take a break. Just connecting on to that. I think especially in Japan, and especially people who are finishing college, most people don't actually know what they want. Like maybe they have some interest, but many people don't even have interests. They like have literally no idea what they want to do, what to do after college, and then they just like, I guess I'll work for XYZ company. And I guess I was looking at it from that person's perspective, having read the Fountainhead. Like, it doesn't really tell you what to do, right? So it doesn't help you in that case. Like, Rourke is obsessed with buildings. Rourke likes to build.
He's got it figured out.
But if you have no idea what you want to do, then like, what are you? Are you just a piece of the like? Do you just suck? Is that?
Are you one of the unwashed masses?
And like, you probably are actually.
Maybe.
But it sucks. Like, it kind of sucks. Yeah.
Well, that's like you don't just decide one day like, I'm gonna be a genius, like fucking architect or whatever, right? But I still, it's still, there are still things beyond this, like being genius or being like having this like innate drive towards something. I feel like it does. What I found thinking about this book is like the act of like reflection as being a hindrance. Like I've always, we will finish this, we will break. I've always like, for a very long time, I've like written a kind of, semi regular diary, and I record voice memos all the time, and I've often like thought that reflecting on like my my emotional state, or what I'm doing or what I need to do, reflecting on these things by like speaking them or writing them down, I've always like thought that's valuable. But one thing that I kind of finding value in after reading the Fountainhead is this idea of actually like stopping that process, like of just needless reflection, and like reflection to a point where it doesn't lead to action.
Right. Yeah, there is a line there. Yeah.
And with Rourke, I think what's so fascinating about him is he doesn't think, and like there are parts in this, in the very beginning, it's like it talks about what he has to do next when he's going to meet the dean, and it's like he's not thinking. He's had it already all figured out long ago, and for me, it's a similar kind of thing. Like I'm thinking about it, and when I'm like thinking about it now, it's like you can like set up this thing in your mind, and you can think about, why do I want to do this thing, or what do I want to do next? But at a certain point, you just have to put that down and be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing now, right? So yeah, that's something that I found kind of quite inspiring about this book, for sure. And there's a kind of certain comfort in that kind of drawing that line and being like, okay, there's nothing more to think about now. Like, this is, I just have to do.
Yeah, in a way, work is also like the immediate conscience. So if you like come home and you're like, I really should work on this like painting that I want to do.
Yeah.
Or I could just relax for a bit and watch a movie.
Yeah.
Like is like your immediate conscience. It's like you actually know what you should do. There's actually nothing to think about here. You know exactly what you should do.
Yeah, there's no question.
But you trick yourself into like, oh, but maybe if I.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, let's take a break.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Boys. Okay, we're back.
We're back, book babes. What just happened?
So I think there's quite a bit to talk about. But we were thinking this is probably a good time to kind of just include a couple of quotes. And yeah, just give people an idea of what the book is like and some of the characters and pieces of kind of key scenes in the book. There's kind of two big sections that I think are really, that we haven't really gone that much into and are worth talking about. Which the first is the Toohey's meeting with Peter Keating towards the end of the book, when Peter's had his fall from grace, and Toohey has his like first moment of telling the truth about his motives.
The Mephistophelian dialogue.
Yes. And then after that we have Rourke, who delivers a speech in a courtroom as his defense for blowing up a building that was made by Keating following his design.
Okay, yeah, just read some quotes from the book in tandem, and then we'll maybe leave the listener with a better feeling of what it's like. So, I want to read this one part, which is when Toohey assembles all his like councils. So one of his strategy in accumulating power is, again, destroying greatness, not by denying it outright, but by inflating all kind of bullshit to look great.
Make greatness drown. Yeah,
make greatness drown in mediocrity.
Yeah. And
I said this earlier off mic to Nick, but it's very prophetic.
Who's Mike?
the electrician. Okay, people get confused. Thanks.
They're already confused.
Most inaccessible podcast. Read 700-page novel first. Fuck, what was it?
You said off mic to me.
Oh yeah, I said to you earlier how it's actually very surprising how this came out before the whole postmodernist movement, before Foucault, before Derrida, because that is a perfect like example of this, like, you know, in the book their famous writer's Lois Cook, and she writes all these nonsensical books like the Gallant Gallstone and like,
right,
and it's like a bunch of like socialist slangs here and there, but it's really just nonsense, right? The whole point is that it's nonsense and that it's like against the canon, against the main. Let's destroy the canon, right? We hear this in university all the time. The literary canon is evil. We literally had a class by this little man about marginal literature, right, it's a perfect example of that idea. He's literally Ellsworth too. He's obviously not that smart, but okay.
Well, also, I mean, the intellectual trend of like the deconstruction of meaning, right?
Yes. And it's kind of in Toohey fashion. It is explicitly stated in the words themselves, although it's hidden in all this like bullshit language, right?
Right.
So like when you say deconstruction of reason and meaning, or shit like that, like deconstructionism, it literally means to destroy and make everything to shit, right? That's what it means. But people are like, yeah, I'm a deconstructionist. Anyway, so
I'm a deconstructor myself.
I'm going to read a little excerpt from... I'm going to unalive myself. Read a little excerpt from when Toohey made some of these nonsensical councils by accumulating like untalented youths. The Council of American Artists had as chairman a cadaverous youth who painted what he saw in his nightly dreams. There was a boy who used no canvas, but did something with bird cages and metronomes, and another who discovered a new technique of painting. He blackened a sheet of paper and then painted with a rubber eraser. There was a stout middle-aged lady who drew subconsciously, claiming that she never looked at her hand, and had no idea of what the hand was doing. Her hand, she said, was guided by the spirit of the departed lover, whom she had never met on earth. They did not talk so much about the proletariat, but merely rebelled against the tyranny of reality and of the objective. Especially that last sentence, I think, is so accurate of just modern, the political left in 2010 and 2020. Like, rebelling against the tyranny of reality and the objective is maybe the key point of a lot of, like, modern leftist agenda. And to the right's not credit, a lot of their reaction then is literally just being reactionary to that.
Right.
So,
about like, so like, what I find interesting about we kind of talked about this off mic as well. Like, start to talk about this, like, so the tyranny of reality, to talk about like art. We kind of found it difficult to like. It seems slightly ironic to me how at the beginning of this book we're talking about these like established styles of architecture. There's no, these are the styles that work. These are the styles that are best. And then viewing that from a critical perspective, but then viewing these kind of like weird experimental attempts at art as a rebellion against this quote like objective reality of like beauty, right? I think, it's like what is something that's beautiful, and how do we know that it's beautiful when we see it? Is something that like I don't think Rand can like really articulate, but it seems like the whole like the fundamental thing in objectivism is that there is like this like true observable thing, like there is knowledge of like true beauty, and I guess the question is like when do we know when we found it? Right.
So, I mean, it's obviously sometimes more difficult, especially when we talk about things like modern art.
Yeah.
And maybe beauty isn't often the right word. Like, very influential pieces aren't maybe necessarily beautiful, but they're inspiring, or they are moving in a certain way.
Yeah.
I guess when we talk about, for example, people or faces, it's very obvious to any single person on earth who's beautiful and who isn't. Like, there are some people who are like, I like this, I like, girls who are like, I like men who like that, or I like red hair or something like that. Yeah. But, just like facial symmetry and shit. Like if you see like a very beautiful person, that's it. And this has also been reproduced a lot, like across cultures, and like they did a lot of experiments with like untouched tribes who hadn't been exposed to Western civilization.
Right.
And it's like, people like a certain like waist to hip ratio, people like certain facial symmetry.
Right.
And then I guess with like also nature, right? There's a certain scenery that's beautiful. And this is a very interesting part in the book that I super resonated with, and this is a dialogue between Wynand and Dominique about like when you see a beautiful scene in nature, like the vast ocean or like a great canyon or shit like that. The Tooheys of the world would have you believe that the greatness of this scene comes from you feeling so small, right? The ocean is so vast, but I'm so small and so insignificant. Or space is so huge and expansive and infinite, and I'm just a little cosmic speck that's nothing.
Yeah.
And that's where that beauty comes from. Whereas for Wynand and Dominique, and I would assume as well, of course, Rourke, it's not that, it's what can I do with this? You know, when they look at a skyscraper, they don't think I'm just a small man and this is a like big building, I'm insignificant. They think this is the achievement of man. This is what man did. This was just a flat plane, right. But we've erected this intense, amazing structure that took so much work and ingenuity. So I guess, yeah, the reaction to like beauty in nature or like big things, that tells you a lot, I think, about people as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, can you relate to that at all? Like, do you?
What, am I inspired by nature?
Yeah, or like, what is your reaction? Because I often got frustrated, but I couldn't really ever articulate it. When people are like, yeah, the greatness of the ocean or this or that, and you know, but people are so small. And it's like, yeah, I fucking hate that mentality. Like, what are you actually saying? I'm just gonna lay down and go fuck myself. like, what's your point? Whereas I do get inspired when I do put it into perspective of, you know, what can we do with this? Like, humans are amazing, and that does motivate me.
Right.
And I think, you know, when people who are like become astronauts, they don't look at space and think they're insignificant. They do look at space and they think, I want to explore this. I want to go there. Like,
right. Okay. There's a difference between like conquering. I don't know. It's a difficult one, actually. Exploring and creating are kind of in a similar category, right? It's about like having a presence within something and connecting to something, right? When I look at the ocean,
just like big, the Grand Canyon, things like that. When you look straight into the sun every morning, what do you see?
Gotta get my vitamin D. I like being in nature, of course. Like, I prefer it to just looking at nature, if that makes sense. Like, if I was sat in a building looking at, you know, a forest, I would probably, well, unless I didn't want to get wet or, you know, subject myself to the elements, you know, I'd probably find it more satisfying being in that environment. I don't know about beauty, though. I don't know.
Beauty is more difficult. But also, let's talk about the New York skyline then. So that's another point in the book.
Yeah.
And obviously, I never really thought about New York in particular because it's not really something that's related to me.
Yeah.
But when I see like big cities or just the complexity of modern societies, like skyscrapers and all that, especially in like middle school when I would go, like, you know, live in a small village and we go on a trip somewhere,
right?
And I would see London or something when I was 15.
A place that has escalators.
Escalators and shit like that. The amazing achievements of man. And then you know, I would think like, how is this actually possible? Like, you know, 100 years ago, we were still like, you know, people dressed fancy, but we all lived in like 2-story wooden shacks, basically.
We all threw our shit out onto the streets.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's one of the things that actually did definitely consciously push me toward economics, because to me, the explanation was economics. To someone like Rourke, it would be architecture, right?
Yeah.
He sees the skyscraper and he's like, this is amazing achievement. How is this structurally possible? Like, I want to build this. To me, it's more like, what are the underlying conditions that make this possible compared to the past? And that is something that has always fascinated me and put me into the direction of economics.
Right.
Like, when you see like an amazing scenery, what are thoughts that come up? Whether it's nature or a city or anything.
I think...
What if I jumped off right now? I also think that.
I do definitely for example, like the first time I went to Tokyo was like mind bending. Like
Right.
how like taking the bus from Haneda and like you see slowly like all of the industry leading to this huge metropolis.
Yeah.
I guess knowing that there's this whole world that's been occurring tangential, like parallel to my existence, and obviously long before that, is quite like, that's like a mind fuck as well.
That is an interesting take. Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know if I would say like. No, I mean I do find them inspiring in that sense for sure.
Well, I know you like the, what is it, the, I'm gonna botch this because I've not actually seen it, the Night Runner or something. What is the Tokyo like cyber?
Is it Akira or what is it? Anime or
movie?
A movie.
There's you have like a poster. I don't know if you have a poster. Yeah. I know you like it. What's the, like, Tokyo sci-fi-esque like parkour like? I don't know if that's parkour.
Ghost in the Shell?
Yeah, what's that? Does that have a?
It's an animated movie.
But there's like another one, Blade Runner. I know you like Blade Runner.
Right. That's an American one.
That's not Tokyo, is it?
I don't know. I know it's San Francisco.
Okay, I know you like that one, and so
right.
So I guess my question would be, what enchanted you about that movie?
Yeah, that's the easy answer. Yeah, the sense of like, it is a sense of like vastness, and this sense of like being within a network of it's a like physical and also like digital network, but it's also as like being a unit within that, if that makes sense. Like,
would it matter if there were people there or not?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about it being living,
right?
Like I always like the idea of like, you know, these little like caves that people are living in with all these like weird little setups and whatever, like your little battle station, you know, like living room and whatever, and everyone having this like sort of dual existence, I guess. Yeah. It's definitely not about feeling small. It maybe, at least not feeling small in the sense of being paralyzed, like you none of your action has any consequence, or that you're not connected with what you're seeing in front of you.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's sort of the implication of what Wynand and Dominique were talking about.
Yes, and it comes out very clearly when the court trial of the Starter Temple, when they're talking about churches. And, you know, churches are a huge, like, unnecessarily high ceiling.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're made to make you feel small in the grace of God or whatever, right. And like they're supposed to contrast your insignificance to the great creator and all that.
Yeah.
So the fact that Rourke built a temple that doesn't have that element was seen as like rebellious.
Yes.
And like arrogance of man and all that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it's more this arrogance, this spirit of man is, I feel, much more motivating.
And also the reality of it, which is that these churches are built by men.
Yeah. And, of course, yeah.
Which is the Tuhi trick.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Good.
Let's go through. This is part of. I don't know how long I will read this. I'll read this until it feels right. It's part of Tuhi's dialogue with Keating. Also, one of the funniest and perfect descriptions. This is separate, but Tuhi folded the paper cautiously and slipped it into his pocket. Keating followed his gestures, moving his whole head like a kitten watching a ball on a string. It's genius. Anyway.
Yeah.
What do you want, Ellsworth? Power, PT. There were steps in the apartment above, someone skipping gaily, a few sounds on the ceiling as 4 or 5 tap beats. The light fixture jingled and Keating's head moved up in obedience. Then it came back to Toohey. Toohey was smiling, almost indifferently. You always said... Keating began thickly and stopped. I've always said just that, clearly, precisely and openly. It's not my fault if you couldn't hear. You could, of course. You didn't want to, which was safer than deafness for me. I said I intended to rule, like all my spiritual predecessors, but I'm luckier than they were. I inherited the fruit of their efforts, and I shall be the one who will see the great dream made real. I see it all around me today. I recognize it. I don't like it. I didn't expect to like it. Enjoyment is not my destiny. I shall find such satisfaction as my capacity permits. I shall rule. Whom? You. The world. It's only a matter of discovering the lever. If you learn how to rule one single man's soul, you can get the rest of mankind. It's the soul, Peter, the soul. Not whips or swords or fire or guns. That's why the Caesars, the Attilas, the Napoleons were fools and did not last. We will. The soul, Peter, is that which can't be ruled. It must be broken. Drive a wedge in, get your fingers on it, and the man is yours. You won't need a whip. He'll bring it to you and ask to be whipped. Set him in reverse, and his own mechanism will do the work. Will do your work for you. Use him against himself. Want to know how it's done? See if I ever lied to you. See if you haven't heard all of this for years, but didn't want to hear, and the fault is yours, not mine. Make him feel small. Make him feel guilty. Kill his aspiration and his integrity. That's difficult. The worst among you gropes for an ideal in his own twisted way. Kill integrity by internal corruption. Use it against itself. Direct it toward a goal destructive of all integrity. Preach selflessness. Tell man that he must live for others. Tell men that altruism is the ideal. Not a single one of them has ever achieved it, and not a single one ever will. His every living instinct screams against it. But don't you see what you accomplish? Man realizes that he is incapable of what he has accepted as the noblest virtue, and it gives him a sense of guilt, of sin, of his own basic unworthiness. Since the supreme ideal is beyond his grasp, he gives up eventually all ideas, all aspiration, all sense of his personal value. I'm going to stop it there because there's so much to talk about. Firstly, you can tell that Ayn Rand came from like Soviet Russia. Mm-hmm. Reading this, using giving people their own whips to whip themselves. Yeah.
And when it talked about the soul specifically, killing not just physical compulsion, but killing the soul. Yeah. I thought of North Korea even more so than Russia, because even in Russia, there was a lot of, I think, like, ironic awareness. Right. Like, people kind of knew how shitty communism was, but no one was allowed to admit it. Sure. So there was, like, this twisted dark humor about it, whereas in North Korea, people are actually, like, fucking completely brainwashed. Sure, yeah.
The discussion as well, so preach selflessness, tell man he must live for others, and like the connections with religion as well. His every living instinct screams against it, and when you realize that you can't achieve this virtue, then you give up on everything.
I think that's a very big point and claim that's made here, and I think it's correct, is that there is actually no altruism, and altruism is always a mask for power. I don't believe there is pure altruism in humanity ever. Okay. I couldn't think, like, the things that come up are like Mother Mary and Jesus Christ, right? And that's also why objectivists don't like Christianity. I legitimately don't think it's possible for people to act altruistically. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make sacrifices for people you love.
So, and just to, like... Yeah. Altruism, I don't think we've actually really defined it.
We haven't. So, in a Toohey way, it would be equally loving every single man on earth, being completely selfless, you're like not wanting anything for yourself,
expecting nothing in return.
Yeah, and just like basically, it's basically perfect equality among people, and like feeling equally indifferent or loving to every single person. So, you know, a mother's love for the child, that wouldn't be altruism. Or like if you love your girlfriend or your friend or your dad or whatever, that wouldn't be necessarily altruism, or you make a sacrifice for them.
Yeah.
But, you know, Tui's altruism would be like, feeling the same way you feel about your girlfriend, the way you feel about every single person on earth, right? Just complete equality of love to everyone.
Right.
And so of course that's a complete ruse. Of course that can't be happening, right? That's not possible. Humans just don't work that way. And every time we're supposed to, we are pushed into this direction by some authority or another, I think it's always a power grab.
And I guess it's it's also by virtue of it being like an ethic that's like preached, and it's like convincing people to try and think in this way.
Yeah. And obviously people aren't on the streets these days like screaming, we want altruism.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have the same thing every day where it's used in politics all the time with, for example, like climate change. It's like the argument is made that like the poor are most afflicted by climate change. So therefore, instead of focusing on the evil capitalism, which actually makes the poor richer, we should be focusing on climate change. And it's all these like, you know, insincere arguments that are based on this false altruism. But then, you know, people get legitimately caught by it. And especially if you're inclined to be more agreeable, it's hard to fight back against it. You're like, I guess if I don't agree, I'm an asshole, right? It's like, yeah, sure, let's fight against this or that. And then it just ends up being like, a Tui kind of character controls whatever the thing is. And then most people they feel forced to go along because they don't want to be an asshole.
Right.
They don't want to be selfish.
Yeah. It's like it's like a rhetorical tool, right?
Yeah.
That you could use for almost anything, really. Maybe, yeah. Cool. Have you got any quote lined up?
I do.
Cool.
Can you read this paragraph?
I can. The basic trouble with the modern world, said Ellsworth Toohey, is the intellectual fallacy that freedom and compulsion are opposites. This is a good one. To solve the gigantic problems crushing the world today, we must clarify our mental confusion. We must acquire a philosophical perspective. In essence, freedom and compulsion are one. Let me give you a simple illustration. Traffic lights restrain your freedom to cross the street whenever you wish, but this restraint gives you the freedom from being run over by a truck. If you were assigned to a job and prohibited from leaving it, it would restrain the freedom of your career. But it would give you freedom from the fear of unemployment. Whenever a new compulsion is imposed upon us, we automatically gain a new freedom. The two are inseparable. Only by accepting total compulsion can we achieve total freedom.
Yeah. I mean, it's rare that you see people verbally asking for total compulsion these days. But this bullshit notion where you completely inflate the meaning of freedom, like if you want freedom to cross the road, you need freedom to obey the stoplight. I mean, that not only is that the central idea that upholds the ideology of the state, it's also the core thing taught in every single school and university in the West. Like you will, if you go to college or even high school, you will be taught this by your teachers multiple times. It's this idea that freedom and non-freedom go hand in hand. All freedom is literally in Germany it was like, because we have a social market economy, right? So it's like those crazy Americans, they try to do free market. Of course that's crazy. You can't have a completely free market. That's completely nonsense. In order to have freedom, you need also restrictions. So we need to have this in order, and then we do the whole Toohey thing. It's like, and that's also like a Marxist thing of like, okay, freedom from what? It's this whole idea of freedom from. What the fuck does that mean? I have the freedom from like starving. So the government needs to provide food for me. Like,
right.
We should have the freedom from having cancer. So we should have social health care.
Yeah. Freedom from versus freedom to.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, it's like freedom of speech doesn't protect you from the consequences of your speech. Like some rhetoric to that effect. And it's like, no, actually, I think it should. Like maybe, like the concept of freedom of speech is like a right? You often see like this defense of like, censorship or whatever is like, you have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom from the, you have freedom of speech, but you're not free from the consequences of your speech, which feels like kind of a contradiction, like especially we're talking about like in terms of like a state acting on someone, right? Like,
I thought it's more like if you can say like, no, I hate.
It's not that no one can criticize you.
Yeah, okay.
But it's rather
you can't get punched in the face or something.
Yeah. Someone can punch you in the face, sure, but no one can, kick you out of a job for something like that, for example, right?
The Rothbardian answer would, of course, be obviously there is no freedom of speech. There's only property rights.
Sure. All right.
So like with the whole burning theater, right? But if you yell fire in a theater,
right.
And the Rothbardian, well, it's the person who owns the theater makes the rules. So like if you go into the theater, you obey their rules. If you don't want, you don't go into the theater. So you don't actually have the freedom of speech to yell whatever you want because it's not your fucking theater.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Yeah, but I mean, this is I think Toohey at his best and at his most pervasive in modern society.
Yeah.
There was another. We don't have to read this, but there was this one scene where, I think it's one of his like elite investor circles. There's this woman called Jessica Pratt, and she's like, if it were up to me, I would have all selfish people shot.
Yeah. I think I had that highlighted. Okay. I'm gonna try and find a final Rourke quote. And then I think I also wanted to talk about the way that society, or like quote unquote like the masses, or like the people are presented. So Rourke's speech starts out more or less, with the words, "Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burnt at the stake he had taught his brothers to light. He was considered an evildoer who had dealt with a demon mankind dreaded, but thereafter men had fire to keep them warm, to cook their food, to light their caves. He had left them a gift they had not conceived, and he had lifted darkness off the earth. The wheel, the flashlight, so on, so forth.
And then talks about like Galileo and those kind of.
So, no creator was prompted by a desire to serve his brothers, for his brothers rejected the gift he offered, and that gift destroyed the slothful routine of their lives. His truth was his only motive, his own truth, and his own work to achieve it in his own way. A symphony, a book, an engine, a philosophy, an airplane, or a building. That was his goal and his life. Not those who heard, read, operated, believed, flew, or inhabited the thing that he created. The creation, not its users. The creation, not the benefits others derived from it. The creation which gave form to his truth. He held his truth above all things and against all men." A little bit further. "The creators were not selfless. It is the whole secret of their power, that it was self-sufficient, self-motivated, self-generated, a first cause, a fount of energy, a life force, a prime mover. The creator served nothing and no one. He had lived for himself." and only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind. Such is the nature of achievement. And everything we are and everything we have comes from a single attribute of man, the function of his reasoning mind. But the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. There is no such thing as a collective thought. An agreement reached by a group of men is only a compromise or an average drawn upon many individual thoughts. It is a secondary consequence. The primary act, the process of reason, must be performed by each man alone. We can divide a meal among many men. We cannot digest it in a collective stomach. No man can use his lungs to breathe for another man. No man can use his brain to think for another. All the functions of body and spirit are private. They cannot be shared or transferred.
Yeah, he's making a case for the individual, and I think a very key point is that thinking and reasoning are functions of the individual mind. So a collective cannot do this. I think this is super accurate, and that we can connect this to the masses, because often I would say that most people are actually not thinking. I don't know if they're capable of thinking, to be honest, because it's just like, I don't know if it's a matter of being trained or just like lacking something, but you do, like, every now and then you meet people who are like, holy shit, this person actually has never had an original thought of their own in their entire life. Like, they watch Marvel and then they go to bed.
I think if you try and ask someone to explain why they feel a certain way about some strong opinion that they have, and that's a very easy way of figuring out whether someone's serious or not about how they think.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like even worse, maybe having no opinions at all about anything. This is there's interesting two symptoms of the same disease in Japan and the West. I would say in Japan no one has an opinion on anything, and in the West everyone has a strong opinion on everything, but they don't know why.
That's a good point. Yeah. In Japan, my hobby is Disneyland. In the West, my hobby is Marvel. Yeah. I like the idea, the functions of the body and spirit are private. They cannot be shared and transferred. Especially like this idea of the spirit. Because he later on, he talks about slavery, like physical slavery. Like if physical slavery is repulsive, how much more repulsive is the concept of civility of the spirit? The conquered slave has a vestige of honor. He has the merit of having resisted and of considering his condition evil. But the man who enslaves himself voluntarily in the name of love is the basest of all creatures. He degrades the dignity of man, and he degrades the conception of love. But this is the essence of altruism. I think that sums like that kind of idea up pretty well. It's like self-imposed.
I think on that note, one of the most, like, this is again from the Toohey Keating speech, like and you mentioned it with where it's like described him looking at the light or something as a kitten on looking at a ball of string. She puts these like savagely accurate. Well, I say accurate. It's not a real scene, so it can't be accurate. But these like super descriptively real feeling apt descriptions. My favorite one is, like when Toohey finishes his speech, and then it goes to Keating, and it's just a narrator saying, "The sounds had stopped, and it was now his function to wait until they started again." This is Keating completely broken, right? This is when Toohey in between speaking. It's like the mouth is not moving now, so now I wait.
Yeah.
And it's like when you think of like all the like meaningless fucking meetings and Zooms we have to attend in our daily like.
God, yeah.
How many times are we actually embodying this spirit?
That's true. Yeah.
Like, oh, the sound is not the sound now, so now I wait for the sound to come again.
Yeah. God. depressing.
It's depressing.
I wanted to talk about when I wrote like a very brief like character summary.
Wait, I just have some more quotes?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay,
sure.
I want some quotes out of this Tui speech. So he talks about sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, every system of ethics that preaches sacrifice grew into a world power and ruled millions of men. Of course, you must dress it up. You must tell people that they'll achieve a superior kind of happiness by giving up everything that makes them happy. You don't have to be too clear about it. Use big, vague words. Universal harmony, eternal spirit, divine purpose, nirvana, paradise, racial supremacy, the dictatorship of the proletariat. Internal corruption, Peter, that's the oldest one of all. Yeah, so I think it's very interesting how if you just look at these terms, eternal spirit, divine purpose, nirvana, paradise, racial supremacy, the dictatorship of the proletariat. So if Christianity, Buddhism, Marxism, Nazism, all wrapped up in one, right? Mm-hmm. They all share this idea of you sacrifice your individualism to the greater good, and therefore you achieve some kind of greater utopian happiness, which, however, we're not going to define because, of course, it doesn't exist.
Right.
I think, yeah, it's, of course, this description, it's quite, I think it's accurate because, these systems do preach that kind of sacrifice. Mm. It is pretty savage to put them all in one, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that's very, very edgy right there. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty intense.
And just like this, Tui is this interesting character of having studied the philosophers and everything for the last centuries and having extracted this idea of what lever do I have to push to get control of the machine, right?
Yeah. And similarly to how one great part about great thing in this book is we see the upbringing of a lot of the characters. Well, or at least Tuhi and Wyland we see. And Tuhi he's kind of evil from the beginning. He's kind of a bit of a psychopath when he's just he sprays down this kid who just had his brand new suit for church.
Yeah.
Completely remorselessly, and he's incredibly intelligent but very physically weak, and yeah, in a way maybe similar to Rourke. He's kind of has this embodied knowledge of what he wants to do from the very beginning, and his is just a pursuit of evil.
Yeah, he's just aiming the opposite way. Yeah.
Yeah. Whilst Rourke is this pursuit of some kind of God, or God, I say,
greater value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some greatness, basically greatness in man. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one more point which I think is also just very topical. From the same speech, but here you might notice something. Might have noticed something. I said it stands to reason. Do you see? Mm-hmm. Men have a weapon against you. Reason. So you must be very sure to take it away from them. Cut the props from under it. But be careful. Don't deny outright. Never deny anything outright. You give your hand away. Don't say reason is evil. Though some have gone that far, and with astonishing success. And here I would have thought that she's alluding to Foucault, but obviously that he wasn't there yet. Just say that reason is limited, that there's something above it. What? You don't have to be too clear about it either. The field's inexhaustible. Instinct, feeling, revelation, divine intuition, dialectic materialism. Blah, 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 blah. Especially on the last one, right? That's, yeah. How many times have I literally heard that in classrooms at our university? In almost whenever this discussion goes anywhere, where it's some when we talk about reason or scientifically determined or can we really say objectively, and some fucking guys yeah, but invokes the dialectical materialism card, and it's yeah, but since we're all just driven by our material instincts, you can't really say any scientific or objective result that's produced by any scientist. It's just them living out their bourgeois privilege, and so, it's when you read headlines like math is racist and things like that, you know, in the US, where it's like, yeah, it's just there's some like greater thing above reason, so therefore, and that's how we take reason away from people. Right?
But I do think there are. I think it's still a question of like separating the wheat from the chaff. Like,
well, obviously people aren't perfect, so people can apply reason incorrectly. They can,
and obviously, and as well, like there are like subconscious processes that we're not aware of that can dictate what we pay attention to and where we choose to project our reason, where we choose to like use our reason. Right?
Yeah. So we can like selectively tackle issues, and we might subconsciously do that.
Yeah.
But I think the point is that once you have this kind of grand explanation of, because there is something greater than reason, you can never trust or you use it only when it applies or when it's beneficial for you, right?
Yeah. So, well, that's the thing. It's like yes and like yes, there are at least the way that I understand it. Like yes, your application of reason can be affected by lots of different things, but reason seems like the only seems like maybe one of the only ways of like navigating out of the trap of our behaviors, and of these like, you know, subconscious things that direct us, or these environmental things that direct us anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like it kind of takes reason to understand that your environment affects how you apply reason.
Exactly, right. So yeah, and I think this is like so common every day. Like, for example, affirmative action is one of those things where it's bound to come up that like if test scores among like some kind of group, you pick the group. Doesn't have to be like, even in like East Asia, there's a lot of that now, where it's like you have like a successful minority from like a different culture, and then like the majority scores lower on test scores. You had the same thing in like pre-Nazi Europe, where Jewish people scored very high on like mathematical test scores,
right?
Because there was like a lot of pressure and culture from family to learn and stuff.
Sure.
You have the same thing now with, I guess, many Asian families in the US.
Yeah.
And you end up with like statistical differentials. It's like, okay, so these people as a group score higher on blah blah blah, so then we have to use affirmative action to make all the groups equal and all that.
Yeah.
And because and one explanation sometimes given is because math is, or whatever this test is, which really just measures your math skill in many cases, or your reason, is like there are racial biases built into how we understand math in the West. Like math is a Western colonial concept, and so it's not actually an objective thing. And that's why we have to and this and that. So this is always like a very powerful tool to never deny reason outright, but just allude to some like higher something that you can't make it too clear, because then you could just explain it away.
Yeah.
If it's just vague enough, then you can undermine reason effectively.
I see what you're saying. Cool. So I guess, one thing that I wanted to talk about next was like the way that society is portrayed in the book. I think it's like you get a lot of descriptions of people going about their daily business. You have a lot of a bit sort of like snooty like descriptions of like, oh, this fat Italian guy is like watching TV with peanuts all over his belly, or like this old lady is hanging out her like huge old like woman bras or whatever.
Yeah.
And kind of like readers of the New York Banner, as you'd imagine, but there was one thing that I really loved about the book is how it presented the almost like Rourke's disciples or the people that really liked Rourke's work, especially like earlier in the novel, when all of Rourke's work is being like chastised in the media and by public opinion. But there are points in the book where he kind of describes like, you know, there was a crowd going to view this new building and many faces looked at it with disgust, but there were a few silent people in the audience who were like inexplicably drawn to the building. And this kind of idea of this sort of silent group of people who resonate with this thing.
Yeah.
And they don't have faces, they don't have names, they don't have a social position, but there's something that's moved within them when they view this thing that's disconnected from what they feel like they should be thinking about something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, again, like this book it's not like the Objectivism Manifesto, like and it's before she kind of really established what Objectivism was, but and I don't know anything about Objectivism really, but there is something about this idea of like knowing within yourself as an individual when there's no one else involved, when there's no other influences on you, or when you feel like there's no other influences on you. Like if you're in like a desert island and you had to choose between two different buildings to live in, or like two different buildings which you liked, which one would you choose? If you remove all these social factors and just find a situation where you're only thinking about what you like in yourself, like what you come up with. And you know, I wonder, the book doesn't really give us any answers or any discussion about this, but like you know, I guess actually it kind of does with Dominique. Like, what do you do when you're living in a society where you can't kind of express those things that you love, or where your kind of like existence is like, how do I say, Dominique is like, she by marrying Keating, she basically becomes this nihilist.
Well, like, so to recap a bit, Dominique and Rourke fall in love.
Right, yeah.
And like she recognizes his greatness in his work and in himself as well. But what destroys her, what she hates, is that all these other fucking people who don't get it, that she has to share work with them, and then she has to witness every day how the public rejects his greatness.
Yeah.
And that's so very painful for her. So he never says this outright, but their like unspoken understanding is that she has to go on this journey to get rid of that unnecessary part of herself and become more like Rourke, in the sense that Rourke isn't bothered when the public rejects his buildings.
Yeah.
Or that like if he builds up a building and then it gets torn down because someone wanted to destroy it or whatever, for him the point was just building it was the whole point, right? The point is that it was erected and now it's gone and there's nothing he can do about it. So like it doesn't really concern him if most people hate him. Like he's not but for her that was like a huge point of pain.
Yeah.
So then she goes on this journey of like, okay, I can only live within the extremes. So to try and like discover or kill that part of myself, I guess, I'm going to just do the exact opposite. Yeah. I'm going to give in to the mediocrity of the masses.
Do exactly what's expected of her.
Yeah, exactly. So she marries the like worst person she would never want to marry, Peter Keating, and later Gail Wynand.
Yeah. And she becomes this kind of person who she like absolutely loathes Keating and has always hated him.
Yeah.
And only in private does this kind of feeling ever really get discussed. But like she always knows that she's like lying to herself, and like they're always waiting for this perfect time to like get back together. And in the end, Dominique and Rourke end up getting married. Mm-hmm. And it's like a very
after 7 years. Yeah, separate.
It's such a painful read.
Yeah.
I was thinking when I was reading it, the forest, like, hotel place.
The summer?
Yeah. I was thinking at the end, so they end up staying there together at the end. I was like, did Rourke design this for them? I was thinking there's maybe some kind of like explanation there.
Yeah, I mean, he also just because he likes the things he builds, he ended up moving his office into one of his buildings.
The house, and he lived in another one of them, right?
Yeah.
Which I thought was it's also kind of like speaks to his not aspiring. There's something kind of domestic about living in a place that you've built, or something very ordinary about that.
I've noticed, to a small tangent, to what would be the opposite of that. What would be the Peter Keating move to basically, as soon as you produce something, to kind of be done with it. And there are scenes in the book like that where like Keating doesn't want to hear about. I think the big one he stole from work, or that like was mediocre, was the
Slotnik Building.
The Cosmo-Slotnik Building.
The Cosmo-Slotnik Building. Also, this book is so much. Just a side note? This book is so much better if you read it like it's some like film noir like actors speaking to each other.
1930s voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he gets all the press and this and that, but it kind of kills him to always be talking about this thing that he personally knows isn't great. And everyone is saying it's great, but personally he knows, no, actually this kind of sucks, and I just kind of wish he watched something together and had Rourke fix it. So, while reading that, it just kind of came to me immediately. I don't know from where, but when we finished writing our graduation thesis, you can tell some people who didn't do a good job of it, and they fucking know it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want anyone to read it. They're like, I wrote it and it's done, and like I never want to talk about my thesis again. It's like, it's like, because you know what you did.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Whereas Rourke would be like, he wouldn't care about advertising it to people.
Of course, yeah.
But he would be like happy with it, and like maybe put it on his blog. Just kidding.
Well, he had it on his wall, right? It was like the only...
Right.
I don't know if it was the Cosmic-Slotnik. It wasn't that building. It was another one of his buildings. It was a studded temple, I think.
Yeah.
Like the only thing on the walls of his office was a sketch of one of the buildings that he made. That's a really good fucking point. And also why when I got my grade for my grad thesis, which I was, it was good, I felt no sense of achievement. I was happy with it, I guess. Yeah. But also, I mean, it's the idea of like when you're reading about appraisal from organizations and institutions and stuff that have clear motivations, and then you get a grade back and it's like good. You're like, I don't give a fuck about this shit. Like, who gives a fuck about what my grade is anymore?
That's how you know at least that you're not Peter Keating.
Yeah, it is. My mum was like, you should be really proud of yourself.
Your mum was like, I've always known you wanted to go into architecture.
Mom, you don't know the monkeys from that program.
No, you shouldn't draw. Drawing is no good.
Yeah,
you should go into architecture.
Nice. I guess final things we should talk about is the Rourke and Dominique's relationship. We haven't really talked about that too much. It's pretty central. Like it's like the kind of main thing of the story, really.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that their meeting is a bit controversial. So
it is, yeah.
Technically, Rourke rapes Dominique.
Yeah.
To just say it, but the way it's put, and I think this is one of the perfect points where it should be like, said that Rourke is like a fictional ideal. You shouldn't imitate it. You shouldn't imitate anything. No means no.
Yeah.
But
they have It's easy to kind of explain their meeting.
Yeah.
What happens is it happens in like the second part of the novel.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were both at that section because I texted you and I was like, this book got horny very quickly because there's this big build up where Rourke he's like failed at his own like he got the opportunity to open his own firm, right, and he ended up failing because of no one was giving him work. So he shut up the office because he couldn't pay for it anymore and ended up working on like a stone quarry, which is next to the building, which is very close to where Dominique Francone lives. And at this point in time, she's single. She's very eligible bachelorette, whatever. And she has this kind of like snooty, I'm above everyone kind of attitude where she's ordering the maids around to do shit and whatever, speaking down to people.
And she's never had experienced sexual pleasure, and
yeah, she's a virgin at the time as well.
Every time like someone kissed her, she felt nothing, and she was just dead inside.
And she goes down to the quarry. I think she's like on a walk or something, right? And she ends up there or something.
Yeah.
They end up having an encounter, and she like can't get him out of her head.
Yeah, well, they look at each other, and it's not said at that time, but later it's like they knew from that first look that they want each other.
Yeah.
And she puts on this act of resistance, but also like trying to tempt him and she invites him home to fix like a pipe, like porn movie.
Yeah, she like breaks part of her fireplace and then
asks
him to come and fix it. And he comes and he looks at it and he's like, you need this kind of marble, blah blah blah. I'll get it ordered in. And then
he teases her by not reacting to it.
But then also when the day comes that the repair is due, he sends a different guy down. To like repair it.
And then she's like, he outplayed me. I can't explicitly say that I want something with him. So
this is very very like interesting.
So
interaction between.
She goes back to the quarry, which he knew she would.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of play, and then eventually, he affords her like an act of resistance at first.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, what gets her off.
Yeah. Yeah, they are clearly like they have a kink for whatever the other person is doing. They have like this like very specific sexual chemistry.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the whole like what is it, consensual non-consent thing, which is incredibly obviously very
dangerous podcast.
But he essentially like it's kind of vaguely described in the book, but it's later reflected on as by Dominique as like being raped. But it's also how do I describe it? When Ayn Rand wrote about it afterwards, and she said that it's if it were like a genuine rape, it would have been terrible.
Yeah.
Whereas this was like the expression of their like dynamic, I guess, and their relationship.
Well, it was consensual rape, basically.
Yeah.
This podcast. We should get away from this.
I mean, no.
Just read it. Read it. There's context.
We don't have to like hang on this too much, but I mean, it's worth talking about their relationship generally.
Yeah.
Because they have this like kind of sort of, I don't know.
He wants to invite something greater in her, like this, not giving a fuck about like unnecessary opinion of other people.
Mm.
And so in order to achieve that, they go on this like great journey, right, where she subjects herself to great pain and he won't stop her.
Yeah.
And it's always described as like he wants to be with her, but she wants to, I guess, understand this Rourke's way of thinking, and then he's like, then I won't stop you.
Yeah. And then I do really like the way that they behave towards each other.
Yeah.
There's this kind of unspoken, like, extreme trust of one another. At that point, when Rourke is like, when they realize that they can't see each other again, and Rourke is like, you know, you don't speak to me, you don't come to me, like, and he's like, I think he tells her he loves her at that point as well. And they kind of have this sort of understanding that they will be together at some point. And then when they do meet again, she's like, I'm gonna do something, and I need you to trust me, essentially. And then she she invites the press round after they spent the night together to break the story that she's cheated on Wyland with Rourke. And it's funny, at that point, it's kind of that is her ultimate kind of rejection of everything.
Yeah.
That's like the Nietzschean line kind of thing where she's like, fuck this, I don't care anymore.
Well, like, even before that, when they blew up the building.
Yeah.
It was
the jig is up in a way.
Yeah, because obviously blowing up the building would get Rourke into court and perhaps into jail for the rest of his life. And her being complicit in that voluntarily showed that she doesn't care anymore what the world thinks of Rourke.
Sure. Yeah, it's she doesn't care what the world thinks of Rourke there, and then when they stage the press thing, it's like she doesn't care what they think of her in a way. Right? Yeah.
Also, the friendship between Rourke and Wynan is interesting.
They're almost lovers in a way. They have that like I'm serious. Like,
they're on the yacht.
Yeah. But they have like this. They have a spiritual, like, I don't know how to say, this like strong compatibility, and they seem to like love each other and rely on each other.
Well, it's the way it's framed. I think, and their last meeting is, Wynan was born not a second-hander, so he was born as a potential creator, but he didn't choose that route.
Yeah. And
so Rourke almost he ends up pitying him, and it said like, although pity is bad, but as Gale said, when you love someone, you always make exceptions.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very hard for Rourke to see like someone who's basically just like himself, but going down the wrong path due to circumstance of life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Randy Rand.
I guess the book ends in a nice way. Everything is over. Rourke has beaten his case. If
I had one criticism of the book, then it would be that it's kind of predictable. Like from the first point, you kind of know, okay, so Tuhi's like Satan. And like there's going to be this great reveal at the end, or not reveal, but there's going to be this showdown of the ideas basically, and then Rourke is going to be I
think I would say it's predictable having finished it, but I was kind of prepared for it to go any direction, to be honest.
I thought there would be like a happy ending with with Dominique and Rourke uniting again.
Really? Okay.
For sure, but I didn't expect the trial to work. We should talk about that maybe.
The trial was good.
After Rourke gives his speech to the court, the jury immediately gets together and is like, he's not guilty.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, basically this is what Tuhi earlier mentioned is, the one weapon you have is reason. So even after all the manipulating, after all the bullshit, Rourke is able to get through to people through exercising reason.
Right.
And speech, right? And at the first, when he got kicked out of uni, he never knew this, and he never knew like what is the principle behind the dean. It's always called, right? How do these people operate? How do the Tuhis of the world operate? What motivates them? but then he finds the words to articulate it throughout his life, and that's essentially what gets him off the hook in the end, right?
Yeah.
So it's more hopeful than I thought it would be.
It also felt significant. I mean, it's like the jury they were all like people working blue collar jobs, and there is kind of this sort of, even though there's some kind of slight kind of elitism, I think, in some of the writing, there is also this sort of deference of like blue collar work in a way.
Yeah, I mean Mike as a character.
Mike, exactly. Yeah. So Mike is like a guy that Rourke meets early on, who's like a carpenter. Right?
I think he's an electrician at the construction
electrician.
site. Yeah.
And I think it's the people, creators, or I don't know if it was just like a simple kind of, paying deference to the blue collar Joes, or whether it was a bit anything more meaningful than that.
I mean, Mike also, he's like basically an engineer. He's obsessed with what he does.
But I'm not talking about Mike. I'm talking about like the jury people.
Right. Well, didn't it mention like how, something about, is this about the jury? Like most people would go for the people with the like easy and pitiful faces to get pity from them.
Yeah,
but Rourke went to the one with stern faces.
Ah, that was it.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So the thing there, of course, is if you're being judged by the jury, I guess the average person would be like, I want someone to take pity on me, but Rourke understands that in order, like, the people who are capable of pity, they're not reachable anymore.
Yeah.
I need actual hard asses who work for themselves.
Yeah.
They're gonna I can get through to those people, right?
Yeah.
The reason.
Yeah, cool. All right. Maybe we should wrap it up here then. Is there anything else that you wanted to say?
I mean, overall, this book is, although very obviously strong in its viewpoint and claims, it's pretty unideological, I would say, overall. Like, anyone can read this and not be like offended.
Yeah, I think yeah, for sure.
Maybe not if you're like a hard collectivist type, but if you think like, I see myself on the left, you can still read this and enjoy it.
100%.
And I think
and take something from it as well.
Yes. I liked it a lot. Do you like it?
I really liked it. Yeah, I think it's it was, I think it came at a very, opportune time in both of our lives as well.
Also because you did your project on architecture.
Yeah. It was nice to read something about architecture. But no, I think it's it's a very approachable book, even though it's long, and it's very very well written. Characters are incredibly well characterized and like embodied in all of the writing. And again, this kind of like, reading a long book gives you so many more opportunities. It gives you so much more when you like really look at the whole length of this thing, the length of these whole people's lives. And it's difficult to disagree with, to be honest. I think like
makes a good case.
Cool.
And I definitely am interested in learning more about Rand as a person and her other works as well. Maybe
Atlas Shrugged at some point.
Atlas Shrugged for sure. Maybe one funny anecdote at the end. So there's like this, I forgot the official name, like American Meeting of Libertarians something. It's like a convention of libertarians. That I think it's still going on. It's every other year or every year or so. And Rand was invited one year, and Milton Friedman had, like big, known to be like capitalist economist, like to the degree that people would now put him on the, like, he's on the far right. He had written or co-authored some article about rent control, saying how, like, basically making like a very mathematical argument of, well, we can have this rent control model, but actually you know, if we adjusted more like this and use a little bit less of the control element, we can have a better outcome, or like making some utilitarian argument.
Right.
How to like do a little less rent control.
Yeah.
And Rand, completely outraged, she got her typewriter out, wrote in all caps like a letter, how dare this crazy like socialist guy even accept the idea of the state controlling the price of rent. Like she was outraged that, you know, he was even
dealing with
like utilitarianly even looking at this as like an option, right?
Right.
Just to put like Rand on the map in like the sphere of thought, like this crazy left-wing freedman. I love that story.
That's crazy. All right. Next time probably Jung, right?
Yeah, well, is it the Red Book, I guess, or?
We'll discuss.
We always make promises and never.
We'll say possibly Jung.
Possibly Jung.
I haven't decided the book. There's a couple. I was thinking of another one, but we'll figure it out. Anyway,
we'll keep it vague for now.
Yeah,
it's easier to control you that way.
Exactly. All right, bye everyone.
All right.
Boys.